Hello.
Hello, morning,
Hello.
afternoon, evening, depending on where you are, obviously. Welcome to another episode of Cloud Native Weekly. Um, Karl's not going to be here today. He's got some work to do. I mean, someone's got to make the money, right? But we've
Mhm.
got Richard here, and then we've got Roberth here, a principal cloud engineer at MS242. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. Microsoft Azure MVP and CNCF and HashiCorp ambassador. That's quite a list. Robert,
Yes.
welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and today you're going to tell us something during our 10-minute stack about GitOps. You're going to show us something. Really looking forward to that. But before that, how was last week? Richard, what have you been up to?
Not too bad of a week. Been playing with Azure Linux for AKS, so that's been quite fun. Figuring out the best way to get your core dumps out into a different location as well for some of our customers. It's been fun trying to figure that out. I think I got it now, so that's good, and seems to have sped up the system quite a bit as well, which is nice, especially on the adding new nodes and stuff compared to Ubuntu. So I'm liking it.
Yeah, wasn't disappointed. We've been wanting to do this for quite some time.
Yep.
But it was an exciting adventure. Well, it was a nice morning to get it done.
Yeah.
Now, Robert, what did your week look like?
Well, in Norway we have this like shared holiday season thing. So I'm basically alone at work because I don't do holidays apparently. But I had some cool customer stuff working with, among other things, AI, re-architecting some SaaS solutions and stuff like that. Cool things mostly. But then I'm pulling down walls and redecorating and making myself totally exhausted and tired. But that's not tech related. That's just unfortunately the thing when you start like owning houses and apartments. That's those kind of things. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
It is what it
Fun
is.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Wesley?
Well, definitely not home improvement because apparently I'm not allowed to touch anything home improvement related because it usually ends up either broken or I end up frustrated. I'm just not the kind of home improvement person. Well, like you just said, Azure Linux was fun to try that. We're working on some playing with some test clusters. But also lots of meetings last week. And here in the Netherlands, we've had some ups and downs in terms of weather. So if you talk about pollen season, that doesn't always work out well for me either.
Pollen is not great. And luckily it's been raining a lot the last couple of days, so I had like a little break. But I was at PSConf in Prague, and when I got there, everything was fine. But at some point, like the pollen just like catched up with Czech Republic. I don't know, and all of a sudden I was like completely devastated. And then I got home and was more pollen. And it's like summer's not great always.
No,
it sort of reminds me of something that happened at KubeCon, Wesley, with you.
Why did you have to bring that up? Yeah, I've got this. Well, I can have pretty bad hay fever, but it depends on the if you have there's different kinds of pollen. So I was fine here, but then we had a little house in the middle of the Netherlands with lots of grass and stuff started getting into bloom. It really helps that the theme of KubeCon was community in bloom, but it definitely was. So at some point I started sneezing so much that my eyes were just bloodshot. It did not look pretty. Did not look pretty at all.
I shouldn't laugh, but it was quite funny.
It was kind of weird because I didn't know this, and then I saw you and kind of went like, "Have you been in a fight?" That's kind of what like seemed like you've been punched in the eye pretty hard.
It was that could be, but then also it was in Amsterdam. I mean, maybe some people might have thought that you do the Amsterdam experience. I definitely did not. It was very bad hay fever. I just woke up in the morning and looked at that. Grass is grass. Yeah, it was. Grass is grass. It took a second to land that. That's okay. Yeah. All right. So we've got the same structure every time. Right now, we're going to look at some cloud native news and some other news as well. Here we go. Okay, so the biggest subject that we were not talking about last time with Mark and with Karl was the MVP renewal, because we were all very excited. We were all waiting. We're waiting to the end of the day. Some people tweeted very early. Some people waited for an email at the end of the day. It was very exciting, but I think it's good to say that we've all been renewed as MVPs. Roberth, you as well. So it's just congratulations to everyone.
Yes.
We get to do another year.
Yeah.
Another year.
It is hard to wait for that like news to drop, because this is my second renewal. Like the first time I was kind of like, well, whatever happens. At least I became an MVP, and then I got renewed and went like, oh really? Okay, well, and I felt that everything was good up until like the last day, right before the renewal. I kind of went like, oh wait, maybe I won't get renewed. But and then people started figuring out how to kind of cheat the system a little bit, get into the portal before time. But then stuff didn't work and couldn't sign stuff, and I was like, but is this real then, or is this just like the system crashing? But
that's what I thought.
Yeah. A lot of people went like, I can't sign it, I can't get through the entire thing, so it might not be real. But turns out it was, I think, for all that got in through that way. So it's good.
It doesn't get easier after this is my 5th year renewal, and it just doesn't get easier each year, you know, thinking, did I do enough? Did I not? Could I have done more? But yeah, hopefully I get the blue disc this year, which will be nice.
If it's your 5th, you should, right?
Yeah.
If they haven't stopped doing it.
And that might be because there's stuff in the MVP package that has kind of been removed. I see new MVPs not getting that certificate thing.
Yep.
I have 2, so, and I probably won't get the 3rd because I think they stopped doing that. Which is
it's all digital badges and digital certificates now instead.
So and that's unfortunate. I feel that there's people that's been like MVPs for 10 years, and they have on their wall like a wall of MVP certificates with different, because they're slightly different. One is the second year I got is white. The first one is like silver thing. So they kind of look a little bit different, and people have been long enough probably also. Well, maybe how long has Sachin been CEO now? A while.
Quite a while. I have no idea how many years, but
before that, obviously someone else's signature is on the thing, so you can kind of see like a history thing. So I thought that is like one of the cool things, but unfortunately they probably cutting it. So
we'll have to wait a couple of weeks. We'll see what arrives in the mail.
Yeah.
All right. So other news. Istio.
Yes.
Istio.
Really
last
cool
week
to
we
see.
Had, last week we had some. It was the week before Kita, I think. Was it?
Yeah, was it? No, I think it might have been last week it graduated as well, or got enough votes to graduate. So.
Yes, it was last week. Yeah. It was interesting, but I think it's well deserved.
Well, Istio's been around for a good while. They have kind of become a standard in many ways. It's now one of the first tools that I would reach for, depending on the situation. But it's part of I guess it's part of GKE, the Google Kubernetes stuff, I think. And is it part of the AWS one as well?
I can't remember if it's. I don't know if AWS hasn't managed add-on for it yet, but it probably will be now it's graduated. But Azure recently have it now as well, so they're getting rid of Open Service Mesh in favor of this. So definitely one to look at.
I guess that also kind of makes sense, right? Because at some point there's been too many service meshes, and then there's it's been okay since the service mesh interface project, which kind of makes it so that everything's kind of following some sort of standard. But you have Linkerd, which is a very unique take on it, and like they built their own proxy solution that everything like that, and then there's everything else that is based on Envoy. So why have 20 different service meshes that all uses Envoy proxy? And it's at some point it's kind of like why spend that much time doing that? So makes sense.
Well, and what's impressive is that with all the other because it's been around for quite some time, but with all the other service meshes coming up, it's still there, and now it's the one that's graduating. So and it's beating the rest, if you will.
Yep.
Though we do use some Linkerd though for some simpler use cases when Istio is just too much. When you don't need 95% of it, then Linkerd is a good alternative. I don't think we really look at other service meshes. What a word, meshes.
Yeah.
Meshes.
Yeah, just
service mess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Service mesh. I think the only I think it was in a KubeCon keynote. Someone was working on a service mesh for, was it a video streaming, compressing? But it wasn't really a service mesh. I don't even know what the name was anymore.
It was it a Cisco product? I think it was.
Oh yeah, it was the RTSP thing.
Yeah.
Right, well, in other news, we all love virtual machines because we do. KubeVirt has landed version 1. Virtual machine virtualization inception, running containers on VMs and then VMs inside containers. It's been around for some time. It's impressive that it reached version 1. Do we use it quite often?
No,
but I've heard use cases. I know certain service providers that have their service running on top of Kubernetes, which means like they can do things a little bit more declaratively when it comes to allowing people to spin off instances of certain things. And it's been around since, what was it, 2016?
Yeah, 16.
So, and that's a long time in our world, in the cloud native space. It's like it's ages ago.
It really is.
Yeah.
I think the best thing about it is that single pane of glass, like the Kubernetes API to do your VMs and your containers, or that's probably the best thing about it. Because you have other tools like Crossplane or Azure Service Operator, which can deploy native cloud resources from Kubernetes anyway. So you can still do the same kind of thing with those as you can here, except you're not running your virtual machine in the cluster with the other offerings. So yes, I need to play with it, I think, so see how I like it.
It's the same type of thing like with V clusters and stuff like that. At some point you want to run virtual machines, but you want to have that like total segregation thing where you can run a bunch of VMs, but they're totally out of the system. You can like strip it more down, I think. But I feel that this type of thing is not necessarily for us. There might be someone who's doing like game server hosting and needs to spin up. They want to do those kind of things, but they want to build it on top of a platform and probably running Kubernetes natively on hardware and then doing this on top. So for us, that kind of always is in the cloud world, doing everything through cloud vendor stuff. It's probably not for us, but
no, it exists. It's good to know it exists, but
yes,
there's definitely a use case. Just probably not for us. All right, we're going to move on to our 10 minutes in tech.
All right.
We named this episode Come Flux with Us. I think that was the one.
Yep.
I had to explain this reference to Richard.
It took me so long.
It took him so long. The flux capacitor.
It's been a while since you saw the movie then, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely.
Well.
So, all right. We're going to look at 10 minutes tech today. And Robert, you've prepared something for us.
Yes, I hope. Let's hope the demo works. So let me first explain what you're looking at. So you're looking at Visual Studio Code. I'm going to show some files on top there, and I have two terminals. One's running K9s, however you want to pronounce that, just to have like a little bit of visual representation of what's going on. But what I'm going to show off is basically GitOps with Flux. And since it's a 10-minute thing, I'm not going to have time to deep dive into all the topics. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to bootstrap, as they call it, Flux onto a Kubernetes cluster. So I have a Kubernetes cluster spun up in with kind that's totally empty, has nothing in it. And the things we're gonna get in, I'm gonna just yank I'm just stealing from the documentation because why not? So this is kind of like the high level architecture of Flux. It is based on some controllers. So it has a source controller. That's the one that's kind of looking at your Git repository, or it could be a storage account or S3 bucket or anything like that. Anything that's immutable and versioned. That is kind of like what GitOps is. It needs to be stored somewhere immutable and versioned. So the source controller is looking for all the changes happening in your source of truth, pulls that information down, writes a little bit to the Kubernetes API, and then you have the mainly the customized controller. So obviously this works with customize, but it also takes normal Kubernetes manifests. So I think it's worth just saying that. So if you just have a bunch of manifests in a folder, that will also work. You don't need to use customize. But they call it the customized controller. And that looks at what's going on in your Git repository and then starts basically just applying things, right? And then you have the Helm controller. So if you're doing Helm releases, it has native functionality with Helm. So it's basically just same as customized controller. It's basically just using kubectl and do stuff on your cluster. The Helm controller is basically just running, Helm install, which is good for many. Like it uses Helm natively. So when you're, working with the cluster, if you need to troubleshoot, you can still use the Helm CLI and all the tools that you're used to. Same with the Kubernetes native things. And then there's like a source controller, notification controller that you could set up to notify the Teams channel or Slack channel or email even when stuff is happening based on different rules. And you also have something called the image reflector controller, I think it's called, which you can set up to look at your OCI repository, and if you put out a new version of an image, you can make it updated automatically. So you kind of get what you think you get if you set something to the latest. But obviously, if you put something to the latest, it's the latest at the time when it's doing whatever, and then it doesn't update. So you could set it to a specific version, but say like these deployments, we want to automatically update. We're not going to look at that. That's more complex. What we are going to look at is my little demo environment. I have two folders. First of all, one called apps. We'll look at that soon. And then clusters. So that's kind of like how you usually do it with Flux. You have a clusters folder. Inside of that, we have a dev and prod, which is my two environments. And inside of there, I have another folder called web app, which is a customization file. And if you look at, for instance, like dev, we basically, this is as easy as customization I can do without getting into a lot of weird stuff. It's not necessarily the best way of doing things, just to, just to make that clear. There's other ways we could do this that probably could have been better in a full-on setup, but just to make it this easy to understand, I basically just have a customization which applies what's in the apps and web app. And here we have a customization again because we need some. This is kind of like the file that makes sure that everything is included. I just have one file at the moment, and this one has basically everything. I could have split it up, but so deploying a namespace, setting up the deployment, and a service. This is a very easy demo that basically just spits out a HTML page that says, I am this pod, more or less. So that's the files we're taking, and then we have a name prefix with dev and a set of replicas. If you look at prod, we have exactly the same, but it's prod and more replicas, just so we have a slight difference in the deployments. But if we do this, so like I said, on the right here, I have my cluster. These are the pods. They're sorted by age, I hope. Well, it's kind of hard when it's been up for an hour. So all I need to do right now, I need to run the CLI tool. There's different ways you can do this. You could literally have the manifest and deploy them. You could use Terraform. There's a Terraform provider. If you're using AKS, there's a GitOps add-on, which basically is just Flux. And that's also the case in EKS, in AWS world. Not sure if that's also the case in Google Cloud. It's hard to keep track of all these services at some point.
It really is.
Yeah. So the command I'm running is Flux, which is, the Flux CLI tooling. I use the command bootstrap, and I say GitHub. We can also do like a generic Git. If you're using Azure DevOps, you can also, like, basically everything works. You just might have to do things slightly differently. I set the -- owner to be me because it's my personal GitHub user. The repository is demo GitOps, and then I have the personal equals true because it defaults to kind of be against an organization, and there's slight differences in how you do stuff when it's a personal repository and an organization repository. And then I'm just referencing the path clusters/dev. So if I just press enter here, hopefully it will work. Who knows? So it's generating some stuff. It's generating an SSH key. It puts that out into the Git repository. And as you can see here, we have our controllers deploying. As soon as the source controller is done, we'll see that we'll also be getting the dev web app. Again, because we bootstrapped directly into this. So if I in K9 look at the customizations we have a customization, and this is one of the probably worst parts about Flux, is the fact that the resource to kind of reconcile this is called a customization, which you point towards customizations. That gets confusing very fast when you try to teach people about this. I wish they named it something else. Hopefully, we'll see. I'll continue to complain about it until something happens. But we have one customization. It's called Flux System, and it basically just is exactly what we think it is. It's referencing, we have our interval of 10 seconds. That's 10 minutes. That's the default one. It is towards this path, the cluster/dev, and it's using the source. The source reference is a Git repository called Flux System. If we look at Git repo, we'll see we have one called Flux System, and so in one cluster we could have different Git repositories set up, so the source controller keeps track of several Git repositories. So if we have like a base deployment that everyone has in one Git repository, and then you have specific team repositories or that kind of like dynamics in your organization, you could have several sources being reconciled. And if we look at deploy, we'll see that we have our web app, and it works exactly as expected. What I can do now, I can do a git pull, and I will see that in my dev folder, I now have a Flux system folder, which basically is just, let's see, what you yourself would deploy is a customization with these two files. If I look into that, that's the customization. and our Git repositories. So the things that we bootstrapped is also now written to Git. So if we want to do a change, for instance, like setting the Git repository interval, sync interval to be something else, we can do that here. And you can see basically all the details that we have here. This file is generated by Flux SSA, so do not edit, and you don't want to do that because it's kind of long. So feel free to allow Flux to keep track of this because you don't want to. But that has all the custom resource definitions and all the things that are hard to do. I'm not sure how many lines of code. I think it's like 6,700 and something lines. So don't mess with this. You could obviously, but just allow Flux to keep track of it. So what you could do, if you have, you could, for instance, have your Flux Bootstrap go against kind of like the prerequisite things like CRDs and things like that. And then you could potentially also have basically just one of these set up in your Git repository. So if you have a new cluster, you could bootstrap a cluster against that one folder, and then it would set up all your customizations and then start like reconciling all of them. To kind of emulate this, I'm not gonna run the bootstrap command for the prod instances. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a Flux create KS, which is short for customization. Call that one prod. So if I go here, source, I'm referencing Git repositories. I'm reusing that Git repository resource. So in this fashion, you can kind of like the source controller is responsible for the sources. So you have all these as separate resources in cluster, and this is how you can set up a customization that uses a different Git repository, for instance. Referencing path, clusters prod, interval 10 minutes, and I set it to wait true. That just means that when I click enter, it will wait until it actually is able to reconcile stuff. So you can have that fail out if you're doing this through pipelines or something to that effect. So if I do that, you can see our prod KS is jumped up, reconcile in progress, and it has applied.
Oh wow!
So it's that fast. And if I look at pods now, I'll see I have prod web apps. Well,
Nice.
now I have actually three of them for prod, because that's what I define in my prod customization, that I want the replicas to be 3. So it's using the same base deployment, but different values, different prefixes, and you can do a lot more with customizations. But again, this is one of those I want to show off the basics of it and not start showing off all the intricate things of using customizations.
Nice. It's really cool.
So that is as simple as it gets. Basically, it is that simple. And now, obviously, if I change replica counts, Flux will see those changes and then make it work. I can do that just for fun, and we'll see if I don't normally use my Windows machine that much anymore. So I have a thing that might pop up. Sorry about that. Let's see. We have a drawer. Let's say it's a drawer. Bump replica count. And so I don't have my PGP thing set up correctly. So just ignore that. I have to put in my password. And if I sync that, if you look at the KS one, this is in prod, so it should be prod that kind of triggers. It can take some time because I set the intervals to be 10 minutes. But what you can do let's prod. What you can do is you can use the Flux reconcile command and say, do you want to reconcile the customization called prod with sources, which means that since the source controller is on a 10-minute loop, and the customization is on a 1 minute loop, the customization might try to reconcile but see no changes. While if you're doing this with the -- with source, it says, all right, the source we're using is the Git repo called Flux system. So we want to reconcile that first. So that's kind of how I can trigger an entire thing and make it go faster. And now that it's true, we can look and see we have 4 pods.
There we go.
So nice.
It's that easy. So you can either have it on the just reconcile whenever stuff is happening, which is good. If someone does something in the background which is not correct, you should do this through Git. It would obviously then fix that mistake. But if you feel that you want to, when you push out stuff, that stuff should happen, you could set it up with a web trigger as well. So it would actually, when you push stuff into Git, it triggers a reconciliation loop in your cluster. So you can that's kind of how you can make it go a little bit faster. I usually don't, because it's not that long. So if I send off something through Git and take a swig of coffee, then all of a sudden it's done. So
nice.
Yeah, might probably be more for you change something, you broke it, you need to fix it really quickly. You still want to use source control, and then you could trigger it.
Yeah, but at that point, you probably are connected to the cluster somehow, and at that point, you could use the Flux. So one of what we call the kind of like a break glass scenario is something is happening, your cluster is going crazy, and the Git, since you're using GitOps, is trying to reconcile stuff all the time. What you can do at that point is just basically pause the GitOps process, stop it from reconciling. Connect to your cluster, make sure that whatever is happening is good again, and then restart that. It is what we try to do with GitOps is to make sure that whatever, you don't need to think about deployment. Deployment shouldn't be a thing you have to think about. You should just, when you're done building your stuff and there's a new container image out there in the world, deployment should just work. But obviously stuff happens, things go bad. That's why we're here still, and we're not just a bunch of robots. Well, some of us aren't. But basically, you would have those kind of scenarios as well.
And I think the powerful thing, and I think that's why it's a very, very good demo, is that when people get started with GitOps, obviously it's in source control, it's in Git, and then you have different environments, and when you haven't used it or you're not experienced in it, you might already get overwhelmed and probably have a feeling, I need to have a lot of redundant code because I've got prod and dev and acceptance, and working with the base configuration like just showed also shows that this configuration and GitOps and Flux in general can help you scale this as well. And also can force you into the best practice, if you will.
Yeah, and there's no one right way of doing this. It's like I said, I follow the standard of having a clusters folder, and then I have my environments. And I didn't mention it, but in my dev and prod folders, I have folders per namespace. So that's kind of how I sort it out down the line. But if you have one folder, or even just straight on the root of your Git repository, if you have 200 .yaml files and you don't have any customizations, and you point Flux towards that, it will look at all those and then apply them. So that would basically just be the same as just saying kubectl apply f and then dot to do everything in the folder. So you could, even if you're not at the point where you're doing customization and kind of doing this more advanced types of deployment, if you just have your YAML files in a folder somewhere, you could point Flux towards it, and it will reconcile all that.
Nice.
So
that's good.
very,
Very
very
powerful.
Nice.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right.
It's there's a reason why Flux is one of my favorite tools ever, and obviously it's my go-to tooling for GitOps. But there's also a reason why, like AKS, when you say I want to do GitOps, is that all right? Let's install Flux. It is a really good like backend system. It just works for us that are building platforms and stuff like that.
Nice.
Yeah, I think it's got a great future as well.
Yes.
Everyone's recommending Flux. Everyone's defaulting and standardizing based on it. It's not just a simple synchronization tool. It is very big. It's very good, as we've just seen.
And you can combine it with so many things as well. I just want to mention Flagger, that is in the Flux project. Flagger basically does progressive delivery type things. So you could set it up to automatically update the version of your container, look at metrics to make sure that stuff is actually working. If it detects that stuff is not working, it scales back. Like it does like a percentage, like 10% increase in traffic against the new one. It works. All right, let's do 50, still works. Let's do like 80, still works. All right, let's fully roll over to the new version, and that's now in production.
That's cool.
Yeah. It is.
Saves a lot of effort. Yeah. I was just thinking the same. We'll definitely maybe have to get you back, Rob, for that one day to show us how Flagger works.
No problem.
All right, Robert, thank you very much for taking the time to share this with us and preparing it. Very, very good, very nice.
Yep.
And it also brings us to the end of our show for today. Tomorrow we're gonna think about what we're gonna talk about next week. We always do that on the Friday. We're very agile about that. No, we'll think of something. So many CNCF projects that we can talk about. So just want to thank you for watching. Thank you if you're watching this at a later time. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Richard, and wish you all a very good day. All right.
All right.
Goodbye.
See you, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.